here's our first strategy stat, and I love this one. It actually leads us into one of the questions that will be coming up as well, which is that whole idea that fewer strategic priorities is better. I know for me, this is something that we work on a lot, is that balancing act between honing in on the key items that we want to articulate and focus on in an organization and not being too watered down with what they are and too generalized. So we'll talk a little bit about that more in detail, but great stat here from Booz Allen and Company related to those organizations that have very succinct, focused strategic priorities are likely to have better performance, both measured in profitability and revenue growth. So great stat there. Really, really like that. Good thing to kind of file in the back of your mind. Ken, you want to walk us through the next strategy stat?
Sure. This stat came from the Harvard Business Review March issue 2010. Authored by a few different people that work in Harvard Business School, and they did some research about the differences between prevention-focused companies and promotion-focused companies, and how those companies emerge differently out of recessionary times. So it was just interesting what they found with the progressive companies. To give a little more insight, progressive companies, they're more focused on market development, asset investment, and the like, where prevention-focused companies might be more focused on employee reductions as a tactic to address recession, or operational efficiencies and scaling back and trying to do what they can to, cut costs out of processes. And it was interesting. Those that are more market development focused, asset investment focused, when they finally do emerge out of a recession, they're 4 percentage points more, higher in sales, 3 percentage points in earnings higher in EBITDA, and just in general, they do about 2 times as well as companies in general. So, we've been talking about this, unfortunately, for a couple of years on how to weather recessions, and it looks like that, no real end is in immediate sight. So it's just a good thing to think about, and I think it ties well with what we do with our strategic planning services. So I thought it was important to bring that up today.
I think that's a really great point, especially when we're thinking about what we prioritize as in 2012 and beyond, and how we can have a measured approach to how we weather the storm from a growth perspective, and not just really focus on those things internally that are primarily solely focused on profitability. So not that that's not important, but anyhow, I thought that's a great stat to have in the back of our minds. So as well. And, we share these statistics just because sometimes we need that third-party expert from far away when we're trying to make our case in organizations and in meetings. And so if these help you, we hope they can forward your cause as well. So, okay, Ryan.
That's it, Erica. We'll get into the first question that was submitted earlier this week. The question is, I'm a big fan of strategic planning, but have never led the charge as a strategy leader. I'm new to our company, on the road too many times, and it has never stuck. Do you have any recommendations to pursue to make it work more successfully this time?
So I think that's a great question that gets asked. Whether people are new to strategic planning or have been doing it and have a pretty robust planning muscle, and it seems like the strategic planning process is one of those business processes that is by its nature problematic because it's not mandatory. So it would be great in organizations if we thought of strategic management, and I do mean that instead of strategic planning, but strategic management like the budgeting process, that it is something that we conduct with rigor, and that and that really comes from the top. So we're all well aware of the fact that if it's not supported and led and championed and committed to from top leadership, specifically the CEO or executive director, nobody else is really going to pay lip service to it, or people will pay lip service to it. Nobody else will really pay attention to it as well. So a couple key tips that I would recommend, and then I'll toss it over to Cammie, is I think one of the problems is engagement, staff engagement. So I would recommend, if we're trying to get it to stick, that you would engage the whole organization, and how you do that we can talk about if you would like, but one of the issues when things don't stay committed to is because people don't feel like their DNA is part of the plan and part of the priority set. So that would be my first tip, is full organizational engagement. The second tip I would recommend is when we're going through our planning processes, the tendency to not connect and be mindful of what was decided upon in an offsite will oftentimes undermine what the outcome of the plan is, and then the commitment to the actual, working against the goals and objectives. And what I mean by that is, and we just did this last week, you have 2 days of sessions, 2 days of offsites, maybe 3 days of offsites, however long it is. It's a lot of talking, it's a lot of ideas, and it's your responsibility as the strategy leader to be ultra diligent about capturing the decisions and actions and feeding those back out to the organization very rapidly after the fact, and capturing the goals and objectives as you heard them. Massaging the strategy and making sure it's strategic and it's got the right priorities and all that jazz, that's important as well, don't get me wrong. But I wanted to just say that what happens sometimes is what gets said and then what gets produced is, if there's a disconnect there, people get a little they're not committed to the plan. So first thing first, employee engagement. Second thing is putting together a plan that was developed based on what came out of the offsite and not what you thought it should be. I think that's really important as well. And maybe the third thing too is, and you heard me mention this just a little bit, is thinking about the strategic planning process as a process, not an event. And that is something that is hard for organizations to commit to, and what that specifically looks like is to start with the end in mind and say, okay, let's assume we have a plan. I mean, it would be amazing if you started your offsite and you said, all right, you know what, let's assume it's going to be 3 days from now, it's going to be a month from now, we're going to have a perfect strategic plan. We know we are because we're good at doing that. Then what? What are we going to do with the thing? And so in a simplistic term is to actually commit to having monthly or quarterly strategy reviews, and I'll continue to hammer on that because organizations have such a hard time committing to it. So starting with the end in mind means committing to those monthly or quarterly strategy reviews in advance. So maybe we set those dates before we set our offsite dates even. We set the expectations about the fact we're checking in with our goals, objectives, and key performance indicators, and we commit to that now so that when we go into our offsite, we understand where all of this is leading to. So I would say those would be 3 big ways to make sure that we have a strategic management process that works for us. Employee engagement, developing a plan that was based on consensus, not what you thought. And the third thing is starting with the end in mind and scheduling your strategy reviews before you do anything in your offsite, so you set the new expectations on what you're going to do with your plan. Cammie, what are some thoughts that you might have related to answering this question?
Well, I think that, when you talk about being able to make sure that people see their DNA in what goes on is really important. And the way to do that in a way that it is almost an accountability exercise is to make sure that your strategic plan gets communicated throughout your organization in a way that can be understood by everyone in your organization. So that really sort of ups the game, because it's not just an executive discussion. It's not just a discussion in between the leaders of your departments. It's actually a promise that you're making to your entire organization to stay strategic and stay on path with that. Another thing especially for nonprofit organizations, for publicly traded companies, for municipalities, the importance of being transparent externally also keeps everyone on task. And what it really does, I know that's a little bit scary, because strategies, yes, they do change. And if they do change, that might warrant a conversation. But if done right, what your strategy will reveal to your internal and external stakeholders is a little bit about your vision, a little bit about your character, about your values, and those kind of things are important no matter what, no matter if you're selling services or products or what have you, because in this day and age, it's that kind of thing that makes the difference for organizations' long-term sustainability, is being able to to have a character that people can understand and relate to, and part of that is communicating your strategy. So as much as you can, I know that there's sensitivities around that, but as much as you can, broad communication, I think, is one other key to that point that Erica kicked off there.
Awesome. So I just try to capture a couple of the ideas around there. One thing I just wanted to mention, then we'll take the next question, is employee engagement can occur. Oh, and there we go. We're both kind of into this whiteboard. As we mentioned, it might be a little bit messy. Sorry about that, everybody, but we'll make sure we get this all cleaned up. So one thing that we wanted to just mention on the employee engagement piece is the, we can get folks engaged via sessions in advance, via staff surveys, via, we call it sometimes a war room where people come and contribute in an organic way. I mean, there's all kinds of ways to get employees engaged. So just kind of, I'd mentioned I would come back to that, so I just wanted to point that out. Okay, Ryan, let's take our next question.
Second question we have is, we do customer research all the time. What kind of research beyond this do we need in order to enter into a strategic plan with all the information needed? And actually, we have a second question that came in that does fit into this, and I'll read that so we can kind of go with both of them. I find that many organizations that do strategic planning really don't do a good job with the environmental scan, especially the external component. Do you have any suggestions or tools or templates to help you to successfully facilitate this process? And I will add that question to the whiteboard right now. And Cammie, we'll go ahead and have you answer that.
Okay. So, yeah, the customer, when we engage for our consulting engagements and go out and go off-site with companies, a lot of times we do a robust kickoff type of activity, a lot of discovery, a lot of assessment before we get in there. And a good percentage of the time, companies say that they have plenty of research, they've got a lot of customer research, that we don't need to spend a lot of time on that. People really want to just jump in, with both feet and get the strategic, retreats going and such. But in order to be able to really make use of the time, and we know that that time is extremely valuable, is to understand that there's certain things about our approach to strategic planning that we believe are really important to vet out. And it goes with the balanced scorecard approach. And so understanding where your organization stands with your employee learning component, with your customers, of course, with your processes, and what is going on with the way that your finances are aggregated and measured and such. Those are all components of the balanced scorecard, and we need insight at each one of those levels as much as we can before we get into the retreats to make the most use of the time to where we come out of the retreats and we have something robust and that is one step away from, an executable plan. So in order to do that, a lot of the customer research might already have, information to the balanced scorecard tiers already in it. Questions like, how long do you have to wait to get responses, to your inquiries on our services or on our products? How long does it take for someone to get back to you for, making something better, be it a, replacement product or enhancement in service? That's a measurement that you can apply towards and feedback that you can apply towards processes, for example. Another question of how existing research might be able to fulfill that employee learning component of the balanced scorecard is how knowledgeable are people when, you call in with an issue? How many times do you have to be transferred in order to get answers to your questions? How quickly do you feel that you have had a sufficient response to your issue? Those kind of things. That talks a little bit about process, that last question, but all of them talk about how well-trained your employees are and how empowered your employees are, and at what point of frontline interaction, do you need to make sure that your employees have, X set of knowledge. So it's that kind of stuff. It's really, it goes beyond just research that's focused on the customer, which is really important, but making sure if your research is not already incorporating that, look at the balanced scorecard. Figure out how you can ask questions with your existing research that fulfill the principles of the balanced scorecard, And if you can't do that as an organization, spend a little bit of time and reach out to the tools. I know we have some tools online with the environmental scan and doing SWOTs, the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats assessments. You know, go online and see what tools are available to you. We have a lot of them, but there's others out there that you can start to deploy now to be able to make sure as you're going into that retreat that you have all the information you need to come out with a real robust plan. Erica, what are your thoughts on that?
You know, a couple things, and then I'll answer the environmental scan question. You know, I was trying to figure out on this whiteboard how to draw concentric circles, but maybe I'll provide a word picture instead. So one of the things I always think about when I'm thinking about going into a strategic planning engagement is the levels of information that we need and where the information fits, because I think that helps, for me anyways, provide a mental model about where the information plugs in, and then as Cammie was talking about how we use that information within the context of the plan, and we like the balanced scorecard because it gives us a robust, holistic perspective. Okay, so backing up for just a second, if we think about a bullseye in our mind's eye for just a moment, so in the center of the bullseye is our company, so that's our company information. We go out one circle, and that would be customer information. We go out a circle from that, we have market/industry information, and we go out a circle from that, and we have our environmental or operating environment information. And within each of those circles, if you will, there's a set of questions and data points and you know, resources, et cetera, that we use to essentially populate each ring of the circle. And sometimes, and this gets to one of the questions that was proposed, you know, sometimes we need a robust information that radiates all the way out through the, you know, through this concentric circle idea. But sometimes we're just updating our plan, and we don't necessarily haven't seen a whole lot of changes in hypothetically in our operating environment, and maybe we don't need to go do a full-blown environmental scan. And just again, hypothetically, depending upon where you are in your planning and where you are in your strategic thinking and all that jazz. So my first point on this whole conversation about external research is maybe kind of yourself drawing your concentric circles and figuring out, you know, what are the business questions that you need to answer related to each one of those rings, if you will. That's the first thing that we do when we're working with organizations. And the reason that we do that, and we were just having this conversation yesterday, the reason we do that is because sometimes a strategic planning engagement can be rife with rabbit trails, if you will, or rife with things that don't produce useful, it's not a useful exercise, it was just an exercise because it's part of the planning process, and we did it last year, so we're doing it again, and it's not really adding anything to the strategic decision making. So we try to get away from that by saying, you know, just because you know, there's a set of things in strategic planning that you think you're always supposed to do, maybe we need to apply it appropriately to our organization first and make sure that it fits with what we need to do now when we're thinking about our company and where our company is and the strategic decision making our company needs to make right now. And so how do we do that? We do that by clarifying what business questions we need to answer in order to have the right information at our fingertips in our offsites. And my thought process on that is the way to do that is kind of thinking about it in these concentric circles, because that starts to bucketize the type of information and then articulate really, instead of going on a fishing expedition, really answering specific business questions and going and getting the information that you need to answer those questions. So that gives us the answer to the original question related to what kind of research we need beyond customer research. Certainly, Cammie's point about the employee component is that, you know, company's in the center, so that employee information is, you know, the first part of that. Answering the second question that was asked related to the environmental scan, so we're out in that further ring, if you will, and as our participant aptly probably noted, is it can be a really laborious process to do a good environmental scan, and but a good strategic plan rises and falls on our intentionality and mindfulness around what really is happening in the external environment and what we're really going to do about it, as opposed to just kind of giving it, just kind of blowing it off because it's perhaps one of those things that is too hard to deal with, such as, for example, some of the organizations we're working with right now dealing with this question of what a long-term recession may or may not mean to our organizations is something that people just sometimes can't get their heads around and is too hard to deal with. So an environmental scan brings that to the forefront, absolutely. And my recommendation related to tools and approach to do a good environmental scan, and I'm trying to think. We actually adapted an environmental scan model out of David Akers' Strategic Marketing Management book, and I'm blanking on the actual title right now, but we'll provide that resource when we send out the notes from today. But in that strategic marketing book, he has a good template on conducting an environmental scan, and I actually think it's probably the best one that I've seen. And we've taken that model and adapted it slightly, but it absolutely goes through the key business questions that you need to answer if you're doing a full-blown environmental scan, and actually also leads you to a diagnosis or to a set of conclusions, which is the other problem with an environmental scan. So what is it telling us, and what are we going to do about the information? And so I would highly recommend checking out that book. It's been really helpful to us, and I'll certainly provide that resource when the notes come out. The other question that someone asked is how to successfully facilitate that process for the environmental scan. And my recommendation is doing it, of course, with a small group, and you probably know that as well, and iterating on a really specific outline. And again, I would recommend the outline from the David Akers book. So happy to pick that up further, but those would be my recommendations.
Well, thank you, Erica and Cammie. We'll go to the third question here that was pre-submitted, and then we'll get into a couple of live questions that have come in. I guess we already addressed one of the environmental. But the third question here, what is the appropriate number of strategic objectives? We have an internal struggle regarding strategic objectives, and how many is too many? Erica?
Sure, I'll tackle that, and then I'll pass it to you, Cammie. So I think this is a pretty quick question. Bouncing off of this, we like using the balanced scorecard, as you guys know, because we think it provides a great strategy framework. So one simple thing to do in sort of very basically is to have one strategic objective for each of the 4 areas of the balanced scorecard. A financial perspective strategic objective, a market growth customer strategic objective, a process excellence strategic objective, and a people expertise strategic objective. Just clarifying for just a minute, we're using the word strategic objective in this sense to articulate the long-term, broad-reaching statements that essentially are our framework that we hang our short-term SMART goals off of, and we cascade from there. So that's the simple answer. The non-simple answer, quite honestly, is I kind of think more than 6 or 7 or 8 starts to get actually 8 gets really unruly. I would keep it under 6. I really hesitate on answering this question with any strong opinion because we shouldn't go into strategic planning as a numbers game. We need to have the right strategic objectives to articulate the strategy for an organization as opposed to worrying about if we have too many, but we all know that if you have too many, your plan just gets really unruly. So I just, have that in the back of your mind as you're leading your strategic planning efforts, but don't, in your planning process, don't shortchange yourself by kind of having a number in mind. So that's just kind of my answer to that question. Our strategy stat at the beginning of the session today kind of reinforces the idea of keeping it to a small few as well. Cammie, anything to add on that?
No, as far as the objectives, I think that, being able to understand your resources and being able to address that to a certain extent in your retreats is important. I think that helps hone the conversation a little bit more. Because, you know, those retreats are really, you go in there and you brainstorm and there's a lot of stuff going on. And what we do during those things is we'll have sort of a parking lot, as you might call it. And that's a good place to sort of capture these ideas, capture these actions, and then towards the end of it, just start to boil it down to the, you know, the things that are really going to matter. And if it's stuff that can be actioned within 3 years, that's one way to do it. If it's stuff that's already has some sort of resources directed to it, that's another way to do it. So, you know, being able to allow your retreat to be that condensation kind of funnel is good, but importantly, to make sure you have a parking lot, and to Erica's very first point, making sure that those parking lot items are somehow represented in the plan so everyone can feel like their input during the session was indeed, you know, taken seriously, and so they can, you know, get their ownership and feel into the plan.
You know, kind of a point on that too, and then we'll wrap on this. You're talking a little bit about process. So one is kind of having in your mind how your strategy structure might work. But the other thing to kind of note, is Kenny was mentioning, is the process to get to them. Sometimes we'll kind of back into them based on how the parking lot or the big ideas come out from an off-site. Another way to go about, so that's one way, right? So that's kind of a consensus model. Another way to go about it that always works really, really well, oftentimes the executive you might know what your long-term strategic objectives need to be, and that's also really, really helpful to have that as you're going into an offsite, because it allows people to work within that structure right away, which I think is really helpful. So there we go. The quick answer on that is keep it less than 6. So, all right, let's take some other questions.
All right, I'm just trying to paste one in here. It did come through. So this is one that came in live. We're an existing successful business with a long track record. We're developing a strategic plan and a business plan to raise capital to help us expand. I would love to hear you discuss how the strategic plan and business plan can work together in a situation like ours. Erica, you want to take a first stab at that?
Sure. I'm happy to take a first stab at that. I think we've been working on this a lot lately. One of the issues is having too many plans in an organization and what's the purpose of each. And so based on the question that was submitted here, it sounds like the way that you're using the business plan is as a document to raise capital, as you mentioned. And so I think a business plan has a couple of purposes. A business plan has a purpose as an external document for fundraising, obviously. Sometimes we use the word business plan to mean the very specific runway items that we're working on over the next 12 months. So that also can be called an operating plan. So we connect the business plan and the strategic plan at the operating level. And so my recommendation related to that is, the way that we built my strategic plan is that we kind of call it like an all-in-one plan. You've got your strategic plan that starts with, of course, you've got your mission, vision, values, but you would have that in both documents. But you've got your strategic plan that articulates those long-term strategies and roadmap down to almost to the annualized level, and it's at that annual level that you take those goals, and that is what gets operationalized in the next 12 months on a quarterly, or monthly basis or project basis, depending on how you're planning. And so it's that break point from the corporate level goal, the corporate level annualized statement, and the department level goal, or specific big rocks for the year. It's right there that if you're making a break between a strat plan and then you're going to just have a separate document that's a business plan and or / an operating plan, that's where we sync up our business plans and our strategic plans. So that, I'm saying that, and I'm using the word business plan as it relates to specifically turning your business plan into an operating document. If we're using our business plan as specifically an externally facing document, then I think there's a lot of harmony between the components of your strategic plan, your SWOT, your budget for, your forecast, your your customer segmentation, all the market analysis, all of those things, your roadmap, that gets used between the business plan and your strategic plan. I think some of the stuff that finds itself in a business plan for capital purposes that you don't always have in your strat plan is a more further explanation about why you exist as an organization, what the business case is for why you're looking for funding, of course, and sometimes even more detail related to organizational structure and all of those things that as you said, an operating business with a long track record, you don't always feel the need to articulate that if it's just an internal document, and a strategic plan tends to be more internal in that regard. So hopefully I answered that with some level of succinctness. But the first thing I would say is be really clear about what the strategic plan is doing for you as an organization and what the business plan is doing for you as an organization, and then understand where your sync-up points are, and I just mentioned where a couple of those sync-up points are. Cam, you want to talk about it from a communication perspective, as these two documents have different communication purposes?
Yeah, I can. My initial thoughts when looking at this question are that, the business plan, as you said, in all of its functionality, it varies from how this successful business with a long-term track record, what that says to me is that you have established relationships with your vendors, perhaps, or with your customers, or with other businesses. So where the business plan might deviate, like Erica is saying, that's the area where your strategic plan can help address those shifts that business plan may be proposing in order to expand your growth. So knowing how that would impact your employee knowledge component, your customer experience, and such, that's another way that you can pull in those components of your business plan into how you are going to strategically sort of walk that path that you've outlined. So being able to communicate both perhaps is important. Internally, does your company understand the trajectory that the business plan takes you? What does it mean for your company's vision and values, and how does that tie in? That's a communication component that can be addressed through strategy. What does it mean for customers? How is this business plan and potential deviations or changes that are associated with it, how does it impact them, and why should they weather the storm with you if you think that there's going to be external things that are visible from a consumer perspective or a customer perspective. So you want to make sure that they're aware of the benefit that should be coming to them, because I would assume that any plan for growth somehow will benefit customers, and if you don't know that right now, to find that out so you can start communicating that efficiently through strategy.
So maybe just wrapping on this, because I do think this is one of the big sources of confusion, is naming things what they are for your organization. Strategic plan being a long-range document that helps you articulate those core underlying strategies for your organization. And strategic for us, we're using the word strategy, and a strategic plan is a strategic plan, not just a plan, when it includes competitive advantage, when it includes a full understanding of the market and the market dynamics, when it includes a longer range view, whatever long means for you. At minimum, I would try to get to that 3-year mark. I know that's hard, and that it clearly articulates that vision, that future state that we're really trying to get to. And I would argue that a good strategic plan at its core serves the purpose as an engagement document and a guiding document and a management tool internally for the organization. If there are components of that document that work externally for funders, for customers, for partners, great. But let's first make it work as a management tool for the organization. So that's the first point, or that's the point on the strategic plan. On the business plan, again, being clear, because we use a lot of different words for that. If it's an external document, as noted, that serves the purpose as a fundraising document and almost as a marketing document, and you could see the overlay of components from your strat plan into your business plan, maybe as probably this person is doing, as you're doing with viewers, probably sharing your strat plan and your business plan. Normally in the business plan, you're making more of a business case about why you exist, again, your history, things that you probably wouldn't feel the need to do in your strategic plan if it was just going to stay internal. The second thing is sometimes we use business plans synonymous with operating plans, and my recommendation on that is identify the sync-up points. Don't over-plan your strategic plan if you do indeed have operating plans. Be clear about where that break point is and that alignment. And my recommendation is your strategic plan absolutely needs to go to the SMART corporate goal level, and then from there, departments or teams or divisions would cascade from there, and that may look like an operating plan, that may look like a marketing plan, that may look like a project plan. So there's all of our planning stuff. So perfect. Okay. Please, if anybody, we have one more question. If anybody has anything else that you would like us to address, please, and now would be a great time to pop it in the chat box and or raise your hand. And Ryan's going to take us to our next question.
Fifth question we have just came in is, our company has been checking out MyStrategicPlan and a few other options the past few months. What are the benefits of MyStrategicPlan and a robust plan versus the one-page strategic plan? To me, I like the concept of a one-page plan, but don't know exactly what the trade-offs are. Am I thinking through the differences right, robust versus simple?
Cam, since that's all kind of on a bit of a communication flow, you want to tackle that?
Well, I think that I'm trying to make an assumption here, the concept of a one-page plan, because, of course, you know, within my strategic plan, we do offer that as a quote-unquote report. So, yeah, as far as the robust versus simple plan, I think that as long as a plan from a communication, perspective can be, it can be identified down through the tiers of your organization. So if it's a simple plan, my concern with just straight simple plans is that it addresses, strategic objectives only maybe in one or two tiers. So if you're an organization that has, a front line, some management, and then some, executive management, and maybe goes into the corporate suite type of structure, then, being able to make sure that everyone has a piece of the plan and that it trickles down throughout the organization is a really big deal, because without that, then you really don't get, the organizational type of directionality, I guess, is the word that might not be the best, but you really don't get the whole organization moving in the same direction. So, but maybe I'm the one-page plan. Erica, do you know of any type of one-page plan that might be beyond what we're used to thinking of as a one-page plan to address this question differently?
Oh, you know what? I think it's interesting because this has come up a lot lately, which I find fascinating, and I think there's some product association external from ours related to the one-page plan, but I think sort of on a conceptual idea is that whole concept of like having your strategic plan on one page, and certainly out of the My Strategic Plan system, we have a one-page plan, which has its value as a communication tool to have in front of you to say these are the core components of our strategic plan, and it's not a 50-page document. And I think that's kind of really where some organizations are trying to get away from that just the tomb of information, So I think that's kind of just where the idea comes from, and probably everybody on the phone today would say too, boy, yeah, I'm sure our strat plan on one page would be much better than 50 pages of detail. So on its face value, I think the interesting question related to this is the idea of oversimplification, and Cami, that's totally what you were hitting on as well. And so one thing that we kind of preach, and that's also quite honestly why we developed My Strategic Plan to begin with, is the ability to have, by its nature, a plan produces just a ton of data, as I say, and the goal is to provide the right information to the right individual within the organization or the right department within the organization that's supposed to take action on that goal or objective or action item. And while we need to see the whole picture, we don't need to see the whole picture, the broad, massive strategic plan all at the same time. Oftentimes, we need to see a component of it. Maybe it's on the one-page strategic plan, the high level, and we need to see our stuff. and I need my own one-page strategic plan. So that's why we developed My Strategic Plan and all the different reports to say, all right, well, sometimes you need to see the whole thing, and sometimes you just need to see your stuff. But we don't want to shortchange the planning process in the effort of being simple because it needs to fit on one page. And that kind of goes back to my comment about like how many strategic priority or strategic objectives or strategic priorities are the right number. Well, if we start the conversation there, we're starting at the wrong place. If we start the conversation with I want to get my strategic plan on one page, we're starting at the wrong place as well, because we need the grace and opportunity to plan and create and strategize and then synthesize down to the key things, the key strategic priorities or objectives, or the key stuff that might need to be on a one-page plan at the corporate level, but then I probably need my own view of my piece of that, Cammie, as you mentioned, what's my piece of making that overall corporate plan happen, and then therefore I might have my own one-page plan. So maybe kind of taking this in a little different bend is that idea of oversimplification versus robust, and I think that's why people should use tools, whether it's our tool or something else that allows you to meet both masters of having a robust strategy, but also having a simple view that lands at the executive level as well as at the individual level, so people can be really focused on what the key important items are to take action. So.
Yeah, you know, and I think some of the things about the one-page plan that might be attractive to people is that we know that strategy needs to change over time. And because it's just the reality, you try to plan 3 years out, and you know that there's going to be certain things that happen in your internal and external environments that will need to be addressed, and that's why the agendas for strategy sessions, monthly, quarterly, whatever, is really important. But beyond that, okay, so a one-page plan is easy to update. It's easy to make sure that people stay on the same page. But, whatever your tool is, and with My Strategic Plan, the benefit is that, it's a real-time update. And if the one-page plan is attractive just because it's going to be easier to keep updated, then look at technology, just to see what's out there. And if it's not our tool, figure out maybe what you can do internally or what have you. But make sure that your document is something that isn't going to take, a whole administrative team to keep current, and maybe that'll help, give some perspective on this question. And also, figure out a way that, the key parts of your strategy that you're going to want to, communicate to people that aren't necessarily in the, knee-deep into the tasks associated with that strategy. So how does that get communicated maybe to your frontline employees that don't need to see everything? And how does that get communicated to your stakeholders, internally, externally, if it's a board or if it's even the public? So make sure that you have those communication points covered, be it if you go forward with a one-page plan or not. So making sure that everyone sees themselves in the plan is the granular part of it, and making sure that you can adeptly and, with some agility, making sure that your documents can communicate to the appropriate stakeholders to the level that they need insight on. So if you can get those things taken care of, no matter what tool you're using, you're probably going to be on the right track.
That's great. Thank you, Cammie.
So we have a couple questions that came in from Ed, and I just want to let you know, Ed, that we will follow up after the call with you directly. But one of the questions he asked was, there used to be some sample plans in the system. Where are they now? We still have sample plans on the MyStrategicPlan.com, the public side. There are plans there, and I'll send a link out to everybody. But we also just created a landing page with 80 sample plans, and we're just going to keep adding to that. We have not made that landing page public yet. We're still in the works finishing that up, but I will include a link to everybody here so you have a link to that page as well. Some of the plans are customers of ours that have public companies that have made their plans public or available to the system. Other ones are ones that we just found out on the internet and gained authorization to list them there. So we will include that link there. And we have another question. I will read that off here. Let me paste it here first. So the last question, or the next question, Can you suggest 3 to 4 resources, video, book, speech, slideshow, to share with my CEO that will help me emphasize the value of strategic planning and to convince him that it is worth his time and his staff's time? I don't have buy-in yet.
So that, oh boy, I think almost every huddle we have facilitated and done has had some component about a leadership buy-in, and it's just so tough. So I just really emphasize the importance of it, but I also feel a heart for everyone that's just struggling with that right now. One thing that we just did is we produced a very simple executive level a white paper, and it's just a couple pages on purpose, called The Benefits of Strategic Planning, and Ryan will send that out to everyone as well. And our intention behind that was to provide some third-party point resources about why strategic planning is important. So that is a resource that hopefully you'll find really useful. It's intended to be a quick read, and it's intended to really address this particular question. So that's my quick answer. I'm trying to think about some other, we don't have a YouTube video Cami, I was just looking at what you're typing on there. So the white paper that we produce is called The Benefits of Strategic Planning, so just so you know that when it comes over, that answers that. I don't have a YouTube video that specifically talks about the benefits, but I will do that. One thing that you might consider, we're really loving this right now, is that video called The Power of Why, and it was produced by Simon Sinek, and I think that he just did a really awesome job at talking about why, thinking about your why, and the only way that you execute against your why is through a planning process. So that's just another suggestion that has been really resonating with a lot of our clients. I struggle, and I'm just trying to think of some other ideas here too, but I struggle with this question sometimes because part of my feeling about it is, so the absence of having an articulated strategic plan means that there is a void in clarity around the strategic direction of an organization. And for me, I think that's really challenging because, we started talking about this recently, organizations, we believe that organizations have a purpose, have a very specific purpose for existence. And we all come to work every day to fulfill that purpose individually and as leaders. And so by not having even a one page, articulated where the organization is going, and a consensus around that is really befuddling to me because it's so important to have that, even if it's just basic and simple. So, and I don't mean oversimplified, and I don't mean too basic, but just not creating a monster out of the process. And I think that's really why we get a lot of resistance when we talk about doing strategic planning. So I maybe would leave you with the idea as well as maybe think about what can you do that's a very small step that builds the strategic planning muscle. And not doing the whole thing, not going all the way around the track, going deep all the way around the track, as we talk about sometimes, and not having to go soup to nuts from a deep environmental scan all the way to massive performance management. But what does your organization need to do this year that would really help you solidify and create value around the strategic planning process? And Cami, you want to maybe add to that? I was thinking about your passion around small wins and all of that stuff that you talk about.
Yeah, well, I think, where my head initially goes with this is that any CEO is going to be, someone who's looking also external into the, outside of the organization, into the marketplace to see what's going on, what's impacting the company. So, being able to address what's happening in the environment to a degree that where you're shooting to come out in 2 or 3 years, it's really important right now. So if I were pitching to a CEO, I think on the benefits of doing a strategic plan, I would look at what's going on in the industry and look at where the points of some tumultuous activity, it might potentially impact the company, you know, ask the hard questions. You know, how will the company weather certain things? How will the company, you know, respond to developments in technology that their competitors might have a potential leg up on them for? You know, going through the environment and knowing where you know, the churn is and where the technology advancements are, and asking the CEO, you know, how is our company going to go ahead and address these things so we remain competitive, not knowing what the company is here. But, you know, it's those kind of things. I mean, ask questions of the CEO, and then, you know, that's what strategy, you know, addresses. So there's that component of it. The small wins, I think that, you know, and I think the strategy, you know, generally people are thinking, oh, it's pie in the sky stuff. You know, it's the same kind of thing that makes, you know, building a vision statement sort of, you know, like ubiquitous, and it's just, it doesn't feel like people can get their arms around it. You know, there's a lot of case examples out there, and maybe we should dredge up a couple to send out with this, but of how small wins have helped companies achieve something larger, and understanding that those are tangible things that can help the bottom line now, and that can help things that CEOs might be more focused on as far as survival goes, and being able to do both at the same time. There's a really good book called Switch, and the author, Erica, I'm sure you could bust out his name. I forget his name.
The Heath Brothers.
But, yes, the Heath Brothers. So that's a great book. It is filled, it's with stock filled with all sorts of examples on these small wins and what they mean for larger term change and larger term strategic direction. So being able to understand how to articulate how small wins, if placed in a certain trajectory, can really be hyper powerful with being able to get competitive advantages and to be able to position yourself in the future for just long-term sustainability and success.
That's awesome. Cammie, thank you. And I know we've gone long on some of these questions, and we're almost at the top of the hour, but we did take everything that came in. So hopefully you found our time together really valuable.